Hello, everybody. People are still joining us. I am Martha Seelman. I am the Executive Director of Studio Art Quilt Associates, and we are presenting today's Textile Talk. We're really excited that so many of you can join us. The exhibition that we're going to be talking about today is Season After Season. And it is, I think, the last of the exhibitions that we wanted to share because most of their in-person venues ended up being canceled. So it is still traveling. We are hoping that it actually is going to get to travel to China. But in the meantime, your opportunity to see it is here. It's by getting a copy of the catalog for Season After Season through the SAQA website, and then going on the SAQA website under art exhibitions to see the other works that are in this amazing exhibition, to see the artist statements and to find out a little bit more about this exhibition. I'm not supposed to have favorites, but this is one of my favorites. And I think it's because when we first proposed doing Season After Season as a theme, because I live in New England in the United States, I'm used to 4 seasons, and they're very distinctive, and they have different temperatures, they have different plants and flowers and animals visible. And so that's what I was expecting we would get as submissions for Season After Season. But in fact, as you'll see when our 3 featured artists talk about their work, that's not at all what they thought of when they considered the theme of Season After Season. Instead of the 4 seasons that cycle through a New England year, they live in other places. And they also thought about the seasons of our lives. And that's a very profoundly moving way to consider this theme of Season After Season. And if you go on SAQA's website and look under art exhibition, Season After Season, you'll see that actually a number of the pieces in this exhibition similarly took that theme and interpreted it in new and different ways. Before we get started, I wanted to invite all of you to consider being SAQA members as people who are attending the Textile Talks. In your weekly email, there's a discount code down at the bottom. If you use Talks as your discount code, you get $10 off membership. And among a lot of great reasons to be SAQA members, one of the reasons is coming up next month, and that is our annual conference. And that's what this slide is showing. Our conference this year is again going to be virtual, and it is going to be focusing on the wonderful, amazing fiber art that happens in Australia and New Zealand and the whole Oceania region. And one of the keynotes is what you're seeing here, which is the World of Wearable Art annual or biannual competition, and the amazing collection of wearable art that has come out of that competition. So they're going to be one of our keynotes. And here are some of the other amazing speakers that we're going to have, including Austin Kleon, who writes about being an artist, Jenny Bowker, who's talking about how to navigate cultural appropriation, and a lot of our other wonderful Australian and New Zealand artists and their work. So please do consider becoming a member and joining us for our conference next month. Textile Talks occur every Wednesday at the same time, and they are sponsored by these 6 organizations: the International Quilt Museum, the Modern Quilt Guild, the Quilt Alliance, the San Jose Museum of Quilts and Textiles, Surface Design Association, and us, Studio Art Quilt Associates, or SAQA. And we we present the talks in rotation. So you get to see SAQA every 6 weeks, and each of the other organizations every 6 weeks as well. And we invite you to spend some time looking at the 6 organizations' websites, because we all offer a lot of other, both free and just for members, kinds of information and publications. And we know that you're a textile enthusiast or you wouldn't be here. So take advantage of what we offer, because we love sharing with you. Then I want to also thank our sponsors. Without the sponsors, we could not afford to provide this content for free for you, and we want to be able to do that. So please, if you have a moment, reach out to our sponsors and thank them for making this whole series possible. We really appreciate it. My final bit of advice is to be aware that we are recording this, and that what you post in the chat is visible to all of the 428 people who are here. So please be courteous, because we don't want anybody to feel that they are not welcome. Today, we are going to be hearing from 3 of the artists from Season After Season: Shin-hee Chin, Karol Kusmaul, and Lee Fowler Schwimmer. They're going to share with you a little bit about their body of work, including the piece in Season After Season, but also the other kinds of work that they make. They're going to share a little bit with you about their working process and about why they make art in fiber as well as in other mediums. As you watch their presentation and listen to them speak, if you have any questions at all, please post them in the Q&A box. I will be monitoring what you post, and then at the end of Lee's presentation, I will then ask them the questions that you're typing in, and we will answer as many questions as we can before the end of the hour. So without further ado, here's Shin-hee Chin.
Hello. Let's see. Can you see me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. Okay. Hi, my name is Shin-hee Chin. I'm from Kansas. Hillsboro is the town that I work for. It's a Tabor College, but I actually live at McPherson. Can I show the next slide? I kind of bullet pointed about my themes and materials and method. I work with the idea of creativity and motherhood and the interconnectedness of divinity and humanity. And as an immigrant, I work the idea of a cultural identity and hybridity and sense of belonging. Most of my work materials are recycled materials and a yarn and thread that I usually find it at the secondhand shop. And method is I kind of have a 4 distinctively, but random weave and stitch, yo-yo quilt block, coiling with a chisung Korean paper twisting technique into fiber, and mixed media. Today I'm going to more focus on random weave and stitch. Can we go to the next? Actually, my artwork is not shown, but it is okay. You can see it online. That 2018, I happened to see the 2 similar theme for the show. One is a SAQA Season After Season, and in European patchwork, Carrefour European patchwork quilt competition was in the course of the season. So my continuous theme is about women's life and season. So I connected the life of a woman into the seasons. So it only shows a 24 by 32. Actually, when I was working on the slide, it might be gone, but this one is one pillowcase. And then because the size was limited, it's a 72 by 32. So I connected the three panels of a pillowcase. So I just showed the dimension. And when you have three pieces into and then the four elements of a woman's face, these are divided with straight lines, that horizontal and vertical lines. All the fabrics was household fabrics, wool, jacket and skirt and pants, and then polyester and linen, all kinds of them together. And then have my daughter and myself and my mom, we share some features in the similarity in the face. And so I laid out those faces. Since this is a connected three quilt, I have to connection of the four faces. So I use the curvilinear lines and spirals to connect the four faces. And on the right is the European patchwork, and the same idea of a color. Spring as a yellow and green, and then summer as a deeper green, and then blue, and then fall as a red and magenta, and then winter goes to purple and dark blue. And I kind of laid the show a little bit like a circle, kind of an oval shape. And then the color wheel like colors that from yellow to the purple. And I have the numbers look like the clock, the 12 hours a day, and then it connected 12 months of the year, and then also that connect to the woman's life. And so that is my idea of seasons. But this was in 2018, and actually I like this theme. So I'm going to show the next slide, how now I can see it. Okay, thank you for just searching and finding that. So yeah, on the left side is the one that shown at the season after season. So you have some similarity between the two. So when you're working on the same theme in a different organization, you sometimes the size is kind of a regulated, or some theme has a little bit variation of it. So this is my economy of time and energy, that if it is a similar ideas, I work simultaneously. And on the right side is a baby blanket. I recycled it, and then I folded the bottom a little bit to fit to the size. European patchwork has a kind of size limitations too. Can we go to the next slide? Okay, so this one is 4 Seasons of Women. It was made in 2004. When we moved to Kansas 2003, I was a little sick and tired of moving from several places in the United States. And so I told my husband that we are done moving. So I converted the moving blanket into the quilt. Means I'm not going to move anymore. So each piece is a 50 by 70 inches, and then a little bit blown up size of a woman's face. And so those kind of each has the title came from the Bible, Ecclesiastes 3:11. He has made everything beautiful in its time. It can be interpreted in a different way, but I happen to use it for women's faces. And I'm toward to the winter, and I see that each face of a woman is beautiful in its own right, and the right side of the woman winter has a little bit curiosity and wisdom together. So I like the last one in my own work. Can we go to the next slide? And so I'm going to share my inspiration and the process a little bit. I sometimes take a photo of the nature, and I happen to take a photo of the early spring or late fall. Trees are beautiful. That trees are around, and it shows us all the benefits. But somehow I like the bare trees because it shows the structure of it. And also I show on the right side is that my dad father's book is Rendezvous with a lovely English and American poems, is a translation into Korean. And he used William Butler Yeats' poem that now I may wither into the truth. And so the idea behind of it is that when he retired, he became the fallen leaves, became a fertilizer for the new trees. And he's a very humble, kind soul. And so I like the idea of it. And then I can weave through my artwork. Can we go to the next slide? Okay. And then this is, I did, so you can see a little bit reminiscent of trees and the reflection. In 2015, when I visited my father in Southern California, we watched the sunset together. And at the time, he recently translated William Wordsworth's poem, "It is beauteous evening come and free." That is the relationship between William Butler Yeats, Wordsworth, and his daughter. And so the beauty of the nature and the relationship between the human is kind of present in the poem. So he translated and shared with us, and so it was a very great moment. And I captured my dad, and he was very pensive, and then there's a little bit light remains, and so I call it as the evening hour of a hermit, and it was entered to the Quilt Vision 2020, and I shared this one through that show. Can we go to the next? And then the theme, the fall, late fall trees became my theme. So when the tree toward the winter, they are preparing for the winter, and so all the leaves are fallen, and then the tree itself shows. And in this picture, there's no hero or heroine, no focal point. All the trees create the community, and it shows the structure of the tree. And so when I was entering this one to the Swansfeld Art Center, the quality of the exhibitors was so excellent. And so I was humbled and honored to get the best of the show. It was during COVID time that I was working on this. And also I thought about each tree cannot move around. They just stay on their own area. But then the branches are reaching out each other and create the community. So it's a kind of a talking about the current time, but also the importance of the community and reaching out through the art. Can we go to the next slide? Yes, it shows us the process that I recycled wool blanket. It was a kind of black and brown color. And so I do the ground stitch first. So it takes so long time. So from first and second photo, it took me about 6 months. And then another several months later, finally on the right, on the top, I have one tree that was so exciting. And then after that, I have more trees, and then create the whole trees. Because I did it from the ground, the background was a darker color, but then even in the middle kind of a ground has a lot of brown thread. Without stitch, it is my kind of a little bit found method that if I do not have all the stitches, it is not easy to build up the top layer stitches. So takes a long time, but because I build up from the ground, it creates the illusion of depth. And so that was not my intention, but the outcome was exciting. Can we go to the next? So this is how I create my piece in my basement. I call it as a studio, but every inch count, and even the under the table and the surrounding the wall is covered all the containers. And then I can hear all kinds of sound, the laundry machine and heaters and air conditioners and toilet sound, and then on and off I can hear those sounds, and it is a part of life. Thankful that everything is functioning, and also I'm very thankful that I just get to the hands-on kind of a activity of a needlework. But most of my work is done in the artist residency. Can we go to the next? So this is the Red One residency, 2012. It is our nearby town is called Lindsborg. It is a Swedish descendant, kind of build the town. And so it's very artsy and quiet, cute town. And I do have a residency at the Rester Reimer's formal residency. And then it became the museum and studio. So I have a residency program there, and then build a body of my work. 2012, I had a chance to have a show at the Eisenhower Presidential Museum in Kansas. And so I create a body of work there. Can we go to the next? And so 2018 and 19, I had a chance to have another residency, and I create a mural piece, all the same technique that I use a random weave and stitch. Each one is panels. And so functionally, I can carry individual one or work in my spare time and put it all together. And on the right side, we have unveiling ceremony and our homecoming. And so I was so pleased to be shown my work at the Fine Arts Center at Tabor College. Can we go to the next? And so this is my current residency, and I finished my residency program there once the school starts, and I usually focus on the schoolwork, but I do use my time during the winter break and the summer vacation. Sometimes I all the residency program is kind of operating, so I don't necessarily have all the chance to get into that. But usually, winter I have a residency there. Can we go to the next? So this is my last slide that currently I'm working on it. This is called Splendor in the Grass. And I found that fall grasses almost look like flowers, and it is life-giving energy. And this is going to be installed at Kansas University at Salina Medical Center. And I'm going to finish it all together at the end of March and early April. And so still I know that I'm teaching, and so at school, so I make up blocks, and each one is a 10.5 inches square, so I can carry it in my backpack and then work on it. And when I have a spare time, on the top, then you can see that light. The word new SAQA competition. So I'm so honored to be in the part of them. So it's ongoing things, but also I really thankful Martha asked me to make a presentation that usually I don't do the extra kind of a schoolwork because I'm more focused in the schoolwork, but I really appreciate this chance to share my idea behind of my work and the process with you. And thank you so much. 고맙습니다. And my next is Karol Kusmaul, my fellow artist. Thank you. I'll just turn off the.
Thank you, Shin-hee. I'm honored to share the stage with such wonderful artists, and I also appreciate being invited. My name is Karol Kusmaul, and I live in West Central Florida. Next. I'll be sharing today some of my portraits, including the one that is traveling with Season After Season, titled Grandma Magic. Next. This is my studio. This is on a day when I was screen printing and using the floor as a giant drying rack. I'm an art quilter because I'm a retired art teacher, but I started as a traditional quilter. I have a long arm quilting machine, and I have a business where I finish quilts for others. Below my machine in the carts is the fabric overflow area. I do have some nice built-in cupboards, but those got full. In the foreground at the bottom is a recliner. That's my husband's section. He has this one small space where he can keep his golf clubs and his fishing poles. Next. This picture was taken near the beginning of my Grandma Magic piece. This is before she got her glasses, her wings, her halo, and her chickens. And that's me wishing I had cleaned up a bit before the photo was taken. On the wall, you may recognize the work of some of my quilting idols, Susan Shai, Bodil Gardner, and Pamela Allen. Next slide. This is a close-up of part of my overflow stash. I use a lot of prints from shirts, skirts, and dresses that I find at thrift stores. I bring them home, I wash them, I roll them and cram them into baskets so as to accumulate the maximum palette selection. Next. This is the first quilt that I ever had accepted to a SAQA exhibit. My parents had to move into an assisted living facility in 2011, and we were given a tour, and I was totally excited and impressed with all the activities that they offered for the residents. They had Wii bowling, they had horse races, they had bingo, all sorts of things. But I observed that some of the residents were not so excited as I was. This quilt was made for the exhibit titled, I'm Not Crazy. Next slide. These two were also made for SAQA shows. The first, Redirecting the Ordinary, and the one on the right was for text messaging. I do a lot of people watching. I was in Tampa one time and I was at a stoplight and I spotted this woman at a gas station She was all dressed up in heels and pumping gas. And I thought, how extraordinary. And then the gentleman was multitasking at the airport. Next slide. There was a call for entry at an art center in Clearwater. The call was for modern day saints. And I thought of myself. We live in a wooded area. There are lots of trees here. And my husband doesn't like a messy lawn. So this poor girl often has to pick up sticks when she would really rather be sewing and making art. I shaped this one as a kind of altarpiece, but I always get a giggle because the top navy print fabric used to be a pair of jammy pants. I love my title. It's quite perfect. Next slide. In 2016, I went to the SAQA conference in Philadelphia, which was wonderful. Afterward, my brother took me to a nearby aquarium. There was a room with hands-on musical instruments like this steel drum. Zippers became drumsticks, and I made use of both sides of a print for his shirt and an old pair of jeans. Next. Here is the completed Grandma Magic quilt. In 2017, I had a solo exhibit of my portraits scheduled, and I wanted to make a large piece to make a big impact. I decided to do it about someone I love a lot. My dear friend Rose had passed away, and she kind of reminded me of my own grandmother. So both of them inspired this work. Here in the finished piece, you can see when I divided the background space a bit, she magically acquired wings and a sort of a leafy halo. And I have her wearing a pinny style apron. I have inherited some of my grandmother's actual aprons, but I haven't had the heart to cut into any of them. When the season after season call opened, Grandma was an inch too narrow. So I added the orange braiding on each side, which made her big enough to qualify. Next. These close-up shots show I merged some very, very old patchwork and also some new fabrics. The entire piece is hand appliqued and hand quilted. Next slide. Here is a quilt made for the exhibit, A Better World. Each quilt was to be about someone who makes the world a better place. My hero is a hotel housekeeper that I bumped into in the elevator at the SAQA conference in Nebraska in 2017. The piece is dedicated to all those who work in jobs that not everyone wants to do. Next. In 2017, I formed an international group called Cloth in Common. Every 2 months, we take turns issuing ourselves prompts. These are 2 of them. The first was about time, and the second, identity. Next. This is another Cloth in Common quilt about isolation, and it shows me doing what I love most. Please check out our website. It's clothincommon.com, and we are in our 4th year of creating together. Next. So this talk is dedicated to my sweet friend Rose and my grandmother. Good news, my Grandma Magic quilt has been purchased. And so I had to ask the buyer why he chose it. Here is what he said. A shared love of our grandmothers is what attracted me. I remember stirring up batches of chocolate chip cookies. My grandmother sold eggs and put 2 children through college with egg money. It didn't get much better for me as a child than to get to hunt eggs. I have been criticized for making work that is too personal. No one would buy it, but I disagree. My work is nearly all personal, and I hope that viewers will relate to the topics that I find joy in or concern for. Next up is Lee Fowler Schwimmer.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I live in Dallas. I just moved there recently after COVID hit, so I kind of live there, but I don't really know anyone yet, which is kind of an interesting experience. Can we move to the next shot? So I was hoping that I could combine the picture of myself with this drawn selfie. I like to say these are pieces from the Museum of Me. If you look at the photo of me and you look at this drawn piece, go ahead to the next, if you would. And this is a stitch. The next one is a stitched selfie. What I think you might notice is that the ones I created of me don't really look like the photograph. They don't look like me a lot. And I wanted to ask the question, what does it mean to be an artist? I'm 62 and I've never been a professional artist. I've had a variety of other careers. And when people asked if I was an artist, what I would always say to them is, I just dabble. And I felt at that time that my technique wasn't good enough. So I wasn't an artist yet, not good enough to be an artist. My husband and I are sitting in a bar in DC, and we strike up a conversation with a gentleman who's a professional photographer. And we talk about owning the label artist. And, what I learned from him is a lot of people struggle with the same thing, to call themselves an artist. And what came up for me in that conversation was a definition of artist that eased me into feeling comfortable about it. And an artist is someone who creates because they can't not. And with that in hand, I don't care if those pictures that I created of myself look like me. I created them as an artist because I couldn't not create. Next. This is my entry into the season's exhibit. And here's what was going on mentally for me. There are always times in our life that are difficult. They feel kind of awful. And sometimes the only thing that keeps us going is knowing that we have something to look forward to. And this is kind of like winter when it's dark and the trees look dead, but they're just dormant. And we know that spring will come. And we hold that hope of a better time in our heart. So I think that the cycle of seasons also represents in a metaphorical way that process that we all go through. Something that I'm Jewish, and I love to express my Jewish identity through my artwork. If you look down at the piece, you'll see some Hebrew writing. One of the things that's written there is the word tikva, which means hope. And by the way, the national anthem of the state of Israel is the hope. And I think that's a beautiful thing. We all belong to a variety of different tribes. We all belong to lots of tribes. And so how are we all going to march forward into the world in a way that's healing? I think sometimes when we create artwork that helps people understand one of the tribes we're in, they get a little bit more comfortable and it brings us all together. And I hope that sometimes my artwork can do that as well. So I just wanted to say, I got this thing all done and I measured it because I had been measuring it all along and it was too short and I just freaked out. Didn't have much time left. So I did what someone who's trained in the law does. You go back through the rules and you look for a loophole. And so I found that when they measure it, embellishments, things that stick off, are counted. So I embellished it a little bit at the bottom to make it fit into the requirements of the exhibit. Yay. Next. So one of the things that I do is I work in a variety of mediums, and I really wanted to share pieces from all of the different things that the mediums that I work in, because I think that they cross-influence one another. For about 20 years now, I have done holiday cards twice a year. I send them out at Hanukkah, and I send them out at Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year. So This is a card I sent out in 2015, and these are women. They're all at a quilting bee, and you can see that they are making a Hanukkah menorah, and there's lots of stuff in the background. I won't get into that, but there's a lot of Judaica, things that have symbolism or relevance in Jewish life. Next. And one of the things that you do at the Jewish New Year is you hear the shofar being blown. It's an ancient instrument that was used to commemorate celebrations and also to make announcements. But in the historical traditional Judaism, it's the man that blows the shofar and wears the prayer shawl and the kippah, not the woman. And I like to stir things up. So I created a woman doing all of those things. And I gave her some Converse while I was at it, just to be naughty. So now you're getting to know me a little bit. Next. When people who are Jewish get married, they get married under a wedding canopy, and they call that a chuppah. The plural is huppot. And so I've done a few huppot in my life. This one was for a couple of friends of mine that got married about 2 years ago. So from a technical perspective, I learned a few things. Number one, this is way too big because it doesn't hang easily on a wall afterwards. So I would do that differently. But I also learned that I like Misty Fuse more than Steam Seam. I had a real hard time sewing through the Steam Seam, and I had a problem with threads breaking. And so I pushed through, but I creatively added a whole bunch of new swear words to the English language. So I created a variety of media once again. Next. This is a chuppah I made for a young woman that I've known for many years since she was little. Her father is one of my besties. If you look, I hung this in front of a window. It has, a window treatment so that it's a little confusing, but you can see that there's stars and light comes through the stars. So I used a couple of layers of cloth and cut little stars out so that when you're under the chuppah and light shines through, it looks like you're standing under the stars. And there's lots of symbolic meaning from the Old Testament to that as well. Next. And the wedding was June 6th, and I was invited, but everybody got disinvited because of COVID. And so here's a picture of the wedding couple standing under their chuppah. You can see the rabbi has a mask on. So times have changed. Next. So I like making art quilts, and this is a piece that I made to submit to the Loaded Conversations exhibit, but it didn't get accepted. But I think it was really cool because here's me once again trying to stir up trouble and to provoke dialogue and provoke conversation, because isn't that one of the many reasons that artwork exists? It's to ask us to think and to pick things up and look at them from other angles. So here is this kind of hippy dippy lady. She's sitting in her jeans in a meditative position with the little hand mudra, and she's got a Glock in the other hand, these flowers sitting in front of a lotus flower. And so I was trying to stir up some cognitive dissonance with this piece. Next. I have been thinking about doing something like this for a long, long time. And this is a Passover Seder, but it's captured from a bird's eye view. And it tells a whole bunch of stories from different points in times and different perspectives during the ritual meal that you have during Passover. That's a Seder. And there's even the little Maxwell House Haggadahs or Haggadot, which you read from. There are lots of different Haggadahs, but a lot of people use those because you get them free around the holidays. So someday I'm going to write about this and tell people all the different stories about what's going on so they can kind of understand it. And I'll tell you, when my friends see this, they always look down at the young woman in the lower left in yellow, and she's sleeping, and they always recognize that as my daughter. So next. I also like to work in mosaics. I think about bringing together disparate pieces of fabric in quilting and disparate pieces of ceramics in mosaics. And in this particular piece, the little ceramic pieces, I designed those and created them and fired them and glazed them in a friend's kiln. And so they're all custom done. And this is actually it's mural size, one of two pieces that lives 4 blocks from the Pacific Ocean down in San Diego. And it really, for me, conveys a sense of the community down there. Next. And here's another, I love pomegranates. It's one of my favorite motifs. It has relevance in Judaism. It has, it's referred to in the Old Testament. And this is a piece I did in a workshop with fiesta ware and beads and all kinds of interesting things with an artist named Kim Emerson in San Diego. She's an amazing mosaic artist. I love how this came out, and it's kind of fun. I wanted to share it with you. Next. I also do a lot of work in photography. That was one of the first artistic mediums that I trained in. And I am particularly interested these days in the theme of aging. I'm fascinated with the aging process. I wonder why at 62 I feel fascinated with that. How can I start to embrace that process of aging as something that's beautiful in my own life journey? And how can I convey that in my artwork? So that's a challenge. And this is a bouquet. And so a bouquet is beautiful when you get it, but then it ages and it's dying. But for me, there's something particularly beautiful about the end of life process in a bouquet. I don't throw them out right away. I just sit and love them. You know, wrinkled faces are much more interesting than smooth ones. I keep telling myself that. Next. This was a dear friend of mine. She's passed away. Her name's Hilda. And this was taken at her wedding. She was 90. And many times, you know, my single friends think, you know, it's their train has left the station in terms of finding their bashert, which is your beloved, the one that was created for you. And I always tell them about my friend Hilda that found love at 90. And I say, it's, you know, if Hilda could do it, any of us can. Go Hilda. Next. So I like to find opportunities to infuse creativity in all kinds of things that I do. It's traditional to make a braided egg bread called a challah. And if you notice, it's spelled with a CH because it's like a challah. We don't have that, you know, it's a special, we don't have that sound in English, but it's traditional to make that on Friday nights. And I like doing it. And my husband loves eating it. But this is one that I did around Thanksgiving time, and I put a pumpkin in the middle. It was just an experiment, and it actually turned out, well. I was kind of surprised, so yay. Next, please. And I wanted to show you my studio because I wanted 474 people in the world to imagine that I always live in a state that is this organized. So if you take nothing away from my presentation, please imagine that I'm this neat and clean. It's not really so, but just, you know, tell your friends and neighbors. I got my sewing room also doubles as a guest room. So I had this idea of making a Murphy table. And if you notice on the top left, there's a bed underneath this great big beautiful table. That's my design wall on the left. But when I'm going to have company, I can lift the table up, hook it at the top, the legs drop down, and then I can pull the bed out. And now it's a guest room. And then the shot down there on the bottom is, you know, a panographic one that shows my studio looking way more organized than it ever really looks. And that's just fine too. This is what an artist's studio looks like, right? So that concludes my part, and thank you so much for sharing this time with me.
Thanks, Lee. Karol and Shin-hee, if you would turn your video cameras back on and your mics back on. We have a lot of questions from our audience wanting to know more about your work. So we're going to start with Shin-hee. I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit more about why you are so drawn to using trees in your work.
Well, that is my recent kind of a theme and materials, and tree itself is beautiful, but I like the branches that create all the lines and structure. So as a whole, you can see the tree, but if you see the detail, it is more like an abstract line drawing. So I like the both aspects as a whole, a tree, but then the structure as abstract form. So I like to work both ways.
Mm-hmm. And your trees are gorgeous. Everybody was posting comments. They're staggeringly beautiful was one of the comments.
Mhm.
Karol, I wanted to ask you, you say that you're a people watcher. I am too. When you are choosing which person that you've seen you want to put in your art, what is it about a particular person that grabs you?
Well, I do take a lot of pictures of people. Just the other day, we went to a restaurant that had outdoor seating, and there was a gentleman there with a snake. So I think that's kind of obvious that that would catch my eye. But a lot of times I like my work to kind of tell a story. So I think that might be what attracts me as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and a lot of the pieces that you showed definitely tell a story, or at least make you ask questions, wanting to know what the story is. And that's particularly true of your grandmother piece, because the combination of the apron, the big mixing bowl, and the chickens definitely tells a story. And clearly that story resonated with the gentleman who purchased the piece, because
Right.
that was what he remembered so fondly about his own grandmother.
Right.
Lee, you shared a lot of different kinds of art. I would say that there isn't any question about you being an artist. Clearly, everything in your life is something that you are engaged in creating. So the question then becomes, do you have a favorite medium?
Obviously, quilts and textiles are my favorite medium.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. You know, on one side of my family, my grandmother made quilts, and she lived in rural South Dakota. And it feels, you know, like my mom's side is Jewish, my dad's side not. And it feels like the other half of my soul is from that rural Midwestern life. And so this makes me feel connected to that as well.
Because it's combining the two together.
Yeah.
Although there were a lot of people who really responded to the shofar drawing because of its break with tradition. And also its unusual perspective. And I think that's one of the things that I noticed in a lot of your art, is that you come at what you're creating from different unusual points of view. And I think for me, your Passover Seder is particularly striking because of that bird's eye view, which gives you a sense of just seeing that family and that tradition from a really different viewpoint than, of course, you would ever be able to do in reality. It's a stunning piece. Thank you so much for sharing it.
Someone pointed out to me that that's like God's viewpoint, that, you know, I don't know, you know, but I thought that was a really interesting interpretation.
Yeah, well, that is. I wasn't thinking of something quite that powerful, but
Me either when I made it.
you know, a way of seeing a family in a really different viewpoint. I then have a whole bunch of sort of technical questions. Shin-hee, people want to know, how do you attach that first layer to the blanket? Are you stitching all the way through the blanket or just catching the top of it?
Yes, the first one is all the way through the fabric. So it's a very boring and tedious process, but you know, I become to love it because it's almost like a non-mindedness that you don't have to think too much about it. You just work with your hand and your mind. So I don't mind to do all the labor, but the first stage is all kind of a stitching from top layer to the bottom. The one that the trees in the late autumn is that bottom is the layer of a black fabric, and then in the middle is a wool blanket, and the top layer, instead of fabric, all the stitches serve as a top layer. So when you have all the stitches done, and it's a kind of a there's no specific time that is done, but it's you want to kind of negotiate it a little bit that about this one is okay to be done. Then I work on the top layer and I see the result that if it is the base work is not worked well, then it doesn't support them much. Yes.
Thank you. Yeah,
You're
and
welcome.
they're beautiful. The other question was, your work is all very, very, very large.
Uh-huh.
And they asked whether you would talk about why you are choosing to work at such a large scale.
Oh, thank you for the question. Yes, women's work used to be, the embroidery is a kind of an intimate size, that's small and cute, that kind of functions for like a killing time or make it house beautiful. And women's work become a bigger size. It's about the men's work is always in a big size and women's work is a little bit small size. But when I make it a little bit big, it is kind of a expanding my the idea of art making women's work, and also it kind of makes it beyond my ability a little bit. Sometimes my artwork is too big. I lay on the artwork and then stitch on it, and so it is kind of a tiresome, but at the same, it's a good tiresome work that that I have a passionate about the work, but also the small work combined together, it's like a quilt making, make a big size. And so usually bad quilt is big, but we didn't think about that size because we are using as a bad quilt. Women didn't think about we make a big size of one. But when you see the images, it's not related to the functional themes, but showing the different themes about life, about portraiture, about the nature, then it becomes that quilt become an art, or art becomes a quilt, and so the boundaries become blurred. And thank you for the question.
That is a fantastic answer. Yeah, absolutely. Karol, you talked about how a lot of your fabric comes from thrift stores. So because fabric in thrift stores is a lot cheaper than new fabric, how do you decide I have enough?
Did my husband tell you to ask that question? To me, those fabrics are my palette. So the more choices I have, the better. And it's a lot easier to cut into a fabric that came from an extra large dress that I got for 50 cents than $12.99 a yard fabric. Right. And I love it because I can find interesting prints that I can't find at the fabric store. So
yeah, and they're beautiful, and I really love looking at the quilt that you have behind you, which has just gorgeous fabrics included in it. Yeah. And then Lee, we're right at the top of the hour, so this is going to be our last question. And that is, you said that your photography, you were exploring how you can embrace the aging process. And so are you going to now explore the aging process within your other mediums as well?
I don't know. It's a great suggestion. And I have a question for the participants. What is this thing to which you refer called enough fabric? Has anybody ever heard of it? That's a new term for me. Maybe you can take it up in another textile talk.
Absolutely. No, that sounds great. Thank you all so much for sharing your art and your thoughts about creating. For our audience, please don't sign off yet, because we're going to share again the full slideshow of the season after season exhibition, because these are only 3 of the pieces that are in that exhibition. If you want to learn more, please go to SAQA.com. If you want to become a membership, use the discount code TALKS for $10 off a new membership. And please think about joining us for our incredible conference coming up next month. And it's been great to see everybody, and I look forward to seeing you again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.